Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to another weekly wrap-up wherein I tell you about the things I finished reading in the past 7 days. It was a really good week of reading. I finished a lot of things that I enjoyed, though much of them were also on the shorter side. The first thing that I finished was The Care and Feeding of a Pet Black Hole by Michelle Cuevas. This is a middle grade book and it was definitely aimed at the younger age range of middle grade. It was pretty simplistically written and quite short as well. This story is about Stella Rodriguez, an 11-year-old girl who lost her father about a year ago. She's not dealing with it very well. She won't talk about him and other people won't talk about him around her either. And one day, she discovers a little black hole that she adopts like a pet. And it starts eating things in the house and she starts feeding it these mementos that remind her of her time with her father. And when she feeds these objects to the black hole, she forgets about them and other people lose their memories too. But then the black hole accidentally eats the family's new dog and Stella decides to go into the black hole, accidentally followed by her little brother, to retrieve the dog, but also ends up rediscovering those things that she fed to the black hole and the memories associated with them. I thought this was quite cute and it managed to be pretty light and fun while also dealing with issues of grief and loss of a parent. And so basically I enjoyed everything about it except for one thing. It's set in the 1970s but doesn't feel like it's set in the 1970s. There's this bit of the story where Stella wants to give a recording of her father talking and laughing to Carl Sagan to put on the Voyager probe, and that's like the reason it has to be set in the 1970s to match up with the Voyager timeline. But that was so unnecessary. I do think that that is a little complaint that only adults would have. I don't think that children would notice this or care. Next up, I finished The Black Tides of Heaven by J.Y. Yang. This is one of 2 novellas or shorter novels that are already out in the series. Technically they're companions and you're supposed to be able to read them in any order, but The Black Tides of Heaven happens first chronologically, and you know me, I'm a big believer in reading things in chronological order when I can. So this was a really interesting fantasy story. I actually think there's more world building and setup in this one than actual plot and action, but that didn't make me dislike it at all because the world building was really cool. So this is set in a secondary world in a kingdom called the Protectorate. And there's magic in the world, this thing called the Slack. People with the talent and the training can manipulate the Slack, call upon it, and upon what sounds like elemental forces to do things. The story is that the ruler of the Protectorate, the Protector, owes one of her children to the abbot of a monastery, and when he comes to collect the child, he discovers that instead of giving up one of her older children like he had intended, the Protector has given birth to a new child, except that she actually had twins. One of them was unintended. And the twins go to the monastery when they're 6 years old, but then they leave or kind of recalled because they don't exactly belong there. And Makoya, one of them, has a prophetic ability, she has visions of the future, and of course the Protector wants that ability. So Makoya leaves and Akiha, the second one, goes with her because they're not going to be separated. Akiha doesn't have abilities like Makoya does, but he will become more involved in the rebellion that's brewing. So it's really the story of the early life of the twins and when they choose their genders and kind of choose which direction they're going to go in. Makoya with her visions, Akiha with his more physical involvement in the rebellion and getting away from their mother. Like I said, most of what I really liked was the world building, but the build-up of the story and the characters and what will happen next also has me very intrigued. But let's talk about the world building for a second. The idea of the Slack really intrigues me. I think the magic in this world acts a lot like technology, and I'm really into magic that acts like technology. The other thing, which is completely new, I've never read anything like this before, is that in this world, people are born genderless. And until they choose a gender, they use a gender-neutral pronoun, they. And then when they actually choose what they are, they go through a physical gender confirmation process that gives them the physical characteristics of what they've chosen. And this is such a good idea. I don't know why I've never read an SFF story that does this before. I've read a lot of stories that are really talking about gender and shifting genders and everything, but never a world where it's just a clean slate and you choose, and that's taken for granted. And it's worked into the story really well. It's just part of the foundation of the world, of culture and society and how people think about themselves, and worked into the growth of characters. Like our main characters, Makoya and Akiha, they do eventually choose genders and have to go through that, and their choices, you know, is part of what the characters become. So it was really interesting, and I cannot wait to read more and really continue on the story with the Red Threads of Fortune. Then I finally checked out Gotham Academy and I read volume 1, which is called Welcome to Gotham Academy. This is written by Becky Cloonan and the artwork is by Karl Kerschl and Brenden Fletcher. I wanted to check out Gotham Academy for a long time because I know there's a crossover with Lumberjanes, and I'm a huge fan of Lumberjanes, so I wanted to read that, but after I knew something more about Gotham Academy. This is, of course, set in the Batman universe. Batman shows up, and of course it's in Gotham, but I don't think you need to know that much about the broader universe to enjoy the story. I know I don't know much, and I still really liked it. So it's set at a school, a very special school, and the main character, Olive Silverlock, has come back from a summer that she doesn't remember very well, but something really important happened with her mother. And she's not quite sure who she is now and how she's been behaving. Together with her friends, her ex-boyfriend, and some other people from the school, she starts investigating these hauntings and going into buildings where they're not supposed to go, and actually into the walls of Gotham Academy, searching for what is really going on and how it could be connected to what happened to Olive and her mother over the summer. This one I really enjoyed for the characters. I really like the cast that's been introduced so far, and I could follow them through a lot of adventures. Unfortunately, when I went to add the second and third volumes to my to-read list on Goodreads, I noticed that the ratings go down very dramatically. Like, people don't like the second and third volumes that much. I will still try them because I have hope eternally, but yeah, let me know if you've read them and if you think I should continue on. Gods, Monsters, and the Lucky Peach by Kelly Robson. I loved this novella, guys, and I promise now that I will do a full review of it a bit closer to the publication date. It's coming out on March 13th from Tor.com Publishing, and yes, it was so good. It's kind of bonkers, and Robson made it work. Yeah, let's go straight from that to the one book this week that I have really tepid feelings about. Children of Dune by Frank Herbert. This is the third book in the Dune Chronicles, and I talked about the second book, Dune Messiah, a couple of weeks ago when I listened to it on audiobook. And when I talked about that, I mainly compared it to the Children of Dune miniseries adaptation that the Sci-Fi Channel did some years ago, because that's how I originally experienced the stories from the second and third books in this series. So the book, Children of Dune, was adapted into the second half of the miniseries. There's a bunch of stuff that got cut from this book. I did, once again, already know the gist of the story from watching the miniseries. Aaliyah's descent into madness, the preacher who is Paul Atreides who shows up, and then the testing of the twins, Ghanima and Leto, as they come into their powers and become much more active in bringing about the vision of the future that Paul Atreides began. But there are things that didn't make it into the miniseries, a lot of explanations and side stories. A lot of stuff about Lady Jessica got cut, and I was kind of sad about that because she doesn't have much to do in the miniseries as far as I can remember, but in the book she's really active behind the scenes and obviously doesn't trust her daughter Aaliyah or her grandchildren that much. And Lady Jessica is kind of like wanting to test Aaliyah to see how far gone she is, but also test her grandchildren because she's afraid they will succumb to the abomination of the preborn just like Aaliyah is, and she doesn't know them very well, so she doesn't know how at risk they are. And then, okay, there's this other side story where Lady Jessica gets kidnapped, I think by Aaliyah's people, and she's off on Sluices Secundus with the exiled Carino family and starts teaching Ferredin Carino Bene Gesserit ways. And oh yeah, they're trying to betroth him to Ghanima? And okay, I knew some of this already, but all this stuff got cut. Like, Lady Jessica is way more active in all of this stuff than in the miniseries. And I don't like her that much in the books, unfortunately, but I really liked her in the miniseries adaptations. I really enjoy the overall plot here, once again, but it's the devil in the details. I was pretty bored by a lot of the stuff in here that I didn't already know. Yeah, it's probably important to understand the political shifts, and it's probably going to be really important going into the second half of the series, which I know nothing about. The one thing that really dampened my enthusiasm for the book versions of Leto and Ghanima is that in this book, they are 9 years old. The miniseries ages them up to their late teens or early 20s, and in that way it's a lot easier to deal with what's happening to them. But in the book, you know, they're talking about betrothing a 9-year-old girl to a much older boy. I think there's like this wet dream sequence with Leto when he's off being tested with this much older woman, and there's like some sexual talk between them, and I was so disturbed. But before you say anything, I know people are going to come out of the woodwork and talk about this, but I get the point, I think, of making Leto and Ghanima so young. There's meant to be this dissonance, this very disturbing disconnect between their physical age and their mental ages. They are adults many times over, but they appear to be children, and they struggle against this perception with adults in their lives, but also it's just really creepy, and it's meant to be, I think. So yeah, that's Children of Dune. I thought it was okay, and I'm pretty eager to get on to the last 3 books sometime this year and know the end of the story. Next up, I read 2 trade comics that I got for my birthday. The first one is The Wicked and the Divine Volume 6, Imperial Phase Part 2. This is written by Kieron Gillen, and the artwork and colors are by Jamie McKelvie and Matt Wilson. I've enjoyed this series a lot, and I think that the storytelling and the plot action has improved greatly in like volumes 4 through 6. This is one of those series that I initially was just hanging on to because the artwork by McKelvie is so awesome, but then the story really kicked into high gear, and I've been enjoying the heck out of it since then. So basically this series is about a group of gods who are reborn every 90 years. They become like famous pop stars and celebrities with powers, and then they're all destined to die within 2 years, and then the cycle repeats itself. Of course, the gods do not want to die. They struggle against that, but because they are destined to die, the body count gets pretty high, and in some pretty gruesome ways sometimes. So basically they all want to live, and they feel like there is something else going on. This old lady named Ananke, who I don't think she's actually one of the gods, but kind of the shadowy figure that ushers them into and out of life. She seems to have her own motivations and agenda, which she's not sharing with them, and they've become aware of that. I think there's far more going on in this series rather than just gods living and dying. I think the most important one is probably the interaction between fans and celebrities, and the media coverage of celebrities. Just this whole fan culture, media culture thing, which has been overshadowed for me just in trying to remember who all the gods are and what's happened to them and why it's happening to them. So I think there are a lot of layers here. I think this is also one of the most difficult to read comics that I'm currently reading. I feel like the creators are doing some really savvy stuff with the medium of comics, and it can be kind of confusing, especially for me because I'm not the best reader of comics. It's not so much like reading all the speech bubbles, it's understanding how the visual language works as well. Sometimes I get kind of lost about what's actually happening on the page in this comic, even though I trust that the creators really know what they're doing, and it will be really great if I reread it finally and understand what they're doing. So that was a weird tangent about reading comics, but I feel like this is one that just does some interesting stuff that I haven't completely grasped yet. The other comic that I read is Descender Volume 5, Rise of the Robots, which is written by Jeff Lemire, and the beautiful, beautiful artwork is by Dustin Nguyen. I don't have that much to say about this volume, actually. I'm a bit surprised at that, but I enjoyed it. The storytelling is still good, the artwork is still amazing, and we are inching a bit further into this war between robots and humans. The robot coalition has finally unveiled itself and kind of declared war. I think the thing that I was mostly struck by is that once again, Tim 21, the little robot boy, hasn't been reunited with the boy, now a man, that he was a companion to. It's the thing I've been waiting to happen. I thought it would actually happen in this volume, and it did not. So volume 6, I hope it comes out soon, because that's what I'm really waiting for at this point. And then I stayed up really late last night to finish reading The Will to Battle by Ada Palmer. I started reading this book like 2 months ago, and I didn't finish the last 90% of it until this week. It was finally time to read it, I guess. I was just totally in the mood, and I put off reading some other things to finish it. This is the third book in the Terra Ignota series by Ada Palmer, and I think I will try to do a separate review of it as well. I'm sitting here thinking about what I want to say. It's going to take up a lot of time. This is already going to be a really long video. So I will do that, and unfortunately it's going to be kind of a spoilery review because there's just no way I can talk about what I want to say about this book without possibly spoiling things from the first 2 books, so I guess that will be a review for people who've already read the book. So yeah, I enjoyed it, but it was very different from the first 2, so I enjoyed it in a different way, I guess. Yeah, it was good. And that is everything that I finished this past week. This is gonna be a really long video. Either that or I'm gonna have to cut a lot of the nonsense I've been spewing today. Anyway, if you stuck with me this far, thank you, and I will be back to talk to you again soon in my next video, and until then, bye.